Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to offer Dana, then please do go to justthiszen.org/giving. Your support really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much.
Welcome again, everybody, and a particular welcome to Maria, if you're still with us. It's lovely to see you again. To Sally and to Anna, and of course to everyone who's here this evening. This evening we're going to have a way-seeking mind talk, which is a talk offered by one of our long-term practitioners, our students, about the mind that seeks the way. And this evening, Alastair is going to offer a way-seeking mind talk. Alastair, we go back a long way, don't we? I think probably to around the year 2000, and our paths have crossed again and again over many years, and most recently we made music together. Well, I think it was music anyway. So that was the last path crossing that we had. So it's a particular delight for me to welcome you this evening to offer your way seeking mind talk. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
You. Well, I'll see how I go with my somewhat bunged upness to see, but I'm sure we'll make it together anyway. Let's find my talk first of all. So I just want to start by a kind of an affirmation for practice, really, and that is about the personalness of practice and how it grows, and how at the beginning of practice, like the ox herding pictures, is kind of everything's kind of wayward and yeah, all over the place, and that's kind of where I started. And maybe it's where I'll end as well. So, I'll start by just saying to be with my mess is to be who I am, and to accept myself more deeply. This takes the panic and the shame and places me in the miraculous ordinary, feeling into the boundless of every day that tranquilizes the panic from my theatre of ambivalence. So that's yeah, that's a kind of the stone I've been working with. So in a kind of, what is it, a timeline sense, I was born in the Northeast, in North Shields, close to a ruined monastery called Tynemouth. My mum still always asks me if I'm warm enough. um, yeah. I moved a lot for the first few years of my life, which is probably quite significant. I was born into a tempestuous family. Um, my father was violent and bullying towards my mum. My mum, over a foot shorter than my dad, wasn't going to give up her fire to him, and somehow managed to not to go under despite that. in my early years, my mum went back to work really really soon after I was born. So I was being taken care of by my grandparents, I think. I think that was partly to do with my mum subsidising my father's shadowy activities. By three, I was living in Cumbria, and some of my first memories, formulaic memories, are of my dad throwing us out. And there's a kind of sense of choreography. It was like an interesting one of those first interesting memories, because I can see it's like I've got this memory of seeing it from a few dimensions. It's quite interesting, that sense of being in more than one place at once. It's really interesting. Um, uh, and traumatic, of course. But these are all all things that led me to the inquiry. Um, um, yeah, and so yeah, shortly after that time, I was living with my mum and my sister, and my dad abducted me, and he kind of put me with his parents, and that lasted for quite a few years. Um, the courts were seemed to be amenable to breaking up the family. Yeah, my my experience in those years were quite isolating. It was a strange time in the sense that I didn't feel fully there. I felt like there was a time of uh, a time of a time of splitting for me, and a time of learning to adopt different identities. And yeah, that's what occurred at that time. My grandmother, she was a kind of hunkered down, nagging character who I had a sense of care, but at the same time was surviving a marriage to another psychopath, which was my grandfather. So yeah, that period was quite tumultuous, and that uh, lasted up until I was kind of 9. At that point, just before I was 9, my father had remarried, and that marriage fell apart really quickly, and he killed himself. That at that point, it gave the it, how would I put it? It shook the whole dynamic up, and it made the domestic situation be placed under review by the courts. And I finally went to go live with my mum. In the meantime, my mum had become kind of she was very exotic because she was absent for me. I didn't see her that often, and not often enough. And so she took on a kind of a magical hue. So she, in a way, she was so I think, our parents are our first gods, our first deities, and I think in some respects, I remember tangibly seeing my parents like that. My dad was a exceptional character in a kind of dark way, but he was still exceptional. And my mother was, yeah, quite magical to me. Yeah, so I think my first romance was the sense of estrangement from my mum. I think that was definitely a kind of a first sense of yearning for something that felt transcendent. So it really didn't feel ordinary. Yeah, it really didn't feel ordinary. Um, so and then at the age of 9, I was able to go live with my mum. So with the death came some kind of freedom. So there was a kind of strange experience of loss because it felt like it enabled something. So things were things were quite topsy-turvy. While I was living with my grandparents, there was a fear of death in the house because my grandfather, um, despite being some kind of war hero, had 2 big heart attacks and was very scared of death. He was really hanging on to it, his life. And yeah, it was quite eggshelly, as kind of like step-toeing round a very ill, very militaristic, disciplined man who was somewhat diminished in his confidence. And I think that was an interesting teaching for me. In the sense is I saw something that had been so sure coming under question. So there's something faltering about that absoluteness, which in a way there was some gifts from that, that sense of things not being as certain. Um, and yeah, it did lead to me really questioning a lot in my early 20s, and mm, interested in another way. Um, let's see, let's moving on. Um, yeah, and so I went to live with my with my mum and my sister, which is very exciting for me. I remember a honeymoon period for us going to live in not live go to going on holiday in North Wales, the three of us. And then the kind of reality kind of sank in, and I had to go back to school, a new school, which was difficult. Something energetic had impacted me from my father's suicide, and I became more vulnerable than I was. I'd always been vulnerable, because I struggled to concentrate. I was quite dissociated as a kid at school. I'd definitely say I'd been diagnosed as ADHD now if I was at school. I really struggled to really understand what was actually happening at school. Um, um, and so yeah, I went through school, and struggled, uh, got bullied quite a lot. I was uh, yeah, yeah, not equipped, I don't think, really for the fast dynamic of what was going on, because I'd been brought up in isolation to great extent. By the time I'd gone back to living with my sister and my mum, my sister was 7 years older than me, and she was kind of hanging out with Hell's Angels and like doing a different thing. So yeah, so it was kind of me and my mum. So there was a closeness there, and a sense of the trauma was, kind of added to that intensity, I think, because of that loss. And something actually I didn't know at the time, which I'll come back to, was really charged that relationship for us. So yeah, that was occurring. So there was a kind of intensity, um, which has also been something that's fueled a sense of introspection and a sense of curiosity about relationship and self and what who am I in relation. So there's that was in there, and I think my mum was also um, looking for something. Um, she'd come from a big family and was quite estranged from her sisters, so she was kind of struggling on her own to provide a home, which she did really well. But it came because of all the adversity, it came at her cost to her health, and she nearly died of cervical cancer when I was 12. But she pulled through. She's still here. She's a real tenacious character, which yeah, yeah. I mean, there's something, yeah, something in that which I'm really glad of. And so I went through school, kind of struggling at that time. It was quite a kind of a displaced time in the senses I didn't know what was happening. I struggled to understand my own dysregulation, but I had that kind of closeness with my mum, so that kind of that that felt real, and it felt like it should be there. In contrast to times before where I felt like there was something not right, in the relationships with my grandparents. There was always something that didn't feel quite right about it. Didn't feel like I could commit myself to that relationship with them because of the conflicts and the polarization, and also their vitriol towards my mum. So I grew up, got out of school, which felt like an absolute liberation as an outsider. Yeah, I felt like an outsider, and I went to college and celebrated being an outsider, and was quite different to a lot of people, which was yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I met other people that were also kind of different, and that gave me that gave me uh, a sense of a sense of a sense of belonging in my difference, which is kind of yeah, a change. It was a change. Um, at that time, I also got into like smoking cannabis and hanging out with people that were quite a bit older than me, and so started to take yeah, change my mind a bit, really, subvert some of my own ideas. I gravitated to an older friend who seemed quite calm. He was like an older brother. Um, I followed him into the realms of altered states, started to read the beats, started to read poetry, encountered Eastern philosophy. So I was about, 19, 20 at this point. Kind of identified with the counterculture of the preceding generation, so I was kind of into a lot of the thinking of the 60s, and somehow appropriated that as a kind of etheric family. And it pierced something in me, which I've put there. I think it's called love, but I was unknowing how to cultivate it and to some degree what it meant. I was happily and unhappily in a dream of self-centeredness, not really having a direction. So there was that going on. But there was a dimension of romance for something simpler, closer to nature. And yeah, that kind of fumbled around in the dark in that way, not having anything particularly consistent within myself, and continuing to plunge myself into chaos, despite my own ignorant fragility. And it was around that time that I did start getting a curiosity more for Buddhism. So I was about 22, and I was in Lancaster at the time. Stopped doing the courses I'd been living in Bradford, and I went to Ulverston to Manjushri. So I was 22 to a kind of open day, and kind of found it quite exotic and enjoyed the smells of eco sanitizer and all the golden statues and the robes and the sounds of the horns and the puja, and I quite liked the mansion too. So there's something about the the package which seemed really interesting to me. And later on that year, I spent some time in the York Centre in Pocklington and spent some time working there to stay, and really enjoyed their philosophical dialogue, because the Kadampa tradition, they're really into the dialectic and talking about emptiness, and I found it very stimulating. Also, in one of those pujas, I had my first kind of or, organic, ecstatic experience of sitting and meditating. And that was wonderful. And as I shared it, they said, "Oh, that's an imputation." So I was kind of, "Oh, okay." So that was I thought, well, that's cool. And yeah, I left there. They really wanted me to stay longer, and I was kind of like, yeah, like really kind of like keen to get back and to sign back on, so I didn't lose my my dull paycheck for too long. So I came back and kind of bumbled around more, got drunk again pretty quickly, and kind of any sense of um, uh, steadiness that I accrued from that kind of dissipated quite quickly. And so, yeah, it was, I did have a plan, and that was to go to India. So I sold my motorcycle and bought a ticket to India. I'd also started doing a bit of hatha yoga as well. So um, uh, I yeah, I kind of went to India and was yeah, that blew my mind. That really uh, yeah, I mean it kind of scared me. It was a fascination, and it was terrifying at the same time. It was such a cultural onslaught, a real cultural onslaught. This was probably like 1991 or something like that. I was 22, yeah. So yeah, viscerally it was just absolutely so different to what I'd encountered. Um, and yeah, there's something about the simplicity of some of the people which was beautiful. Um, the responsiveness, the sense of freedom in their um, uh, in their curiosity, which I mean, I was different, so they would be curious, but there was a kind of a warm curiosity, and I saw a lot feel an opportunity to practice something and to welcome me, and yeah, I found that particularly in the deserts when I met the gypsies in Rajasthan. That was a really wonderful time, very romantic time, um, in the stars. And then I was curious about going up to Kashmir and Ladakh, which was really significant for me. And I spent time in Kashmir during the war. Um, and the contrasts, the contrasts of that, there was something, and the simplicity of the people, and the degree of desperateness that the war brought, and the oppression. They were all they were all kind of sifting through me. Um, and then I was stuck there for a while, and then finally I managed to get a flight to Ladakh. Um, and this is just at about the same time, just I think at the same time as the book Ancient Futures was just being finished. So I got to Ladakh and was kind of greeted by this high altitude Tibetan Buddhist culture. Um, and the undevelopedness, the sophistication in their culture, because there was still a deep uh, deep ecology of sustenance in that community. I think it's changed somewhat now, but I got the opportunity to see a real deep embodiment of joy in the Ladakhi people. There was very few people I encountered that showed a sense of unwelcome and a sense of burden. There was definitely suffering, but that suffering was absorbed by a deep sense of practice. And to me, it was still kind of like, I mean, it was really exotic to me, there was this this sense of of otherworldliness about it. But also it gave me an opportunity because I was there on my own. There's very few people there. I think I met some guy that had just done a master's who was there in philosophy at Brighton. I think he was there. He had an Indian family and a couple of other people. Yeah, the opportunity to really look and to really also be with some of my own losses and also to see something about the wheel of life. Because I mean, I was seeing it, I was seeing it. I was going to all these, I was walking to all these monasteries, I went past, I fell asleep in an apricot grove next to this nunnery, this very famous nunnery, so I've discovered. And I walked, I trekked to a lot of monasteries that were kind of covered in dust and some were inhabited by lots of young monks, and then there was some that were kind of ghostly, well, almost from another time. But I was getting bombarded by all this Buddhist imagery. I was reading Carl Jung at the time. I had my Jung with me, and yeah, I was, yeah, I was in, yeah, I was, yeah, 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 I was impressed. Impressed as a tourist, though, I think that's something about it. And I came back to the UK. I spent some time in the summer being in touch with friends again, and again, kind of like doing LSD, finding these existential times, and um, and yeah, feeling a bit like in some kind of um, Lewis Carroll novel on some sense, going from the sense of big to the small, to the big to the small, in terms of how I was seeing things. At this time, I also met a significant character for me who was a really erudite guy. He was a friend. He was a father of a friend, and he had a big impact on me. So I came back to the UK, and yeah, he uh, knew a lot about Eastern philosophy. He practiced yoga. So he became a bit of a mentor for me. And, I'm this kind of guy that's lost his father at a young age, who was quite an absent father. And unconsciously, I was looking for a guiding figure. And for some time, represented that, and he was cool. He was like a really great jazz guitarist, a painter, a polymath. He was really, really bendy. He was like he was like kind of like a rock star guru to me. And he was a very ordinary guy as well, and on some levels, a working class ordinary guy. But he offered me some sense of guidance. In some ways that was good. In some ways it held me back a bit. But it was something I needed to go through. I've got to keep an eye on time here, haven't I? um, so anyway, I went to fry my brains to do some philosophy at Manchester Met. Did a dissertation that was related to Jung and yoga. And again, I was fortunate because I had a Tibetan Buddhist teacher as my supervisor for my dissertation. Um, uh, I didn't use that resource enough, I don't think. I was in Manchester. It was a magical time for me. I'd I had a kind of yoga practice. I'd stopped doing most substances, but I was still doing acid and mushrooms, which was probably not the best ones to leave to last. But yeah, I had a kind of a kind of a romantic relationship to the muse on some levels, I think. And yeah, had a good time, left university and found myself a beautiful lady to be with who was Goan, and uh, met the kind of uh, reality of life, not in an institution, and um, yeah, just kind of we moved in together, and yeah, there was a naivety in me, which there is for someone who's like 24. And I was kind of not really doing much, and then so I went to work in a place called Lothlorien, which is a Buddhist orientate a Buddhist run community in Scotland, and that was my first proper experience of working in mental health. And So I think by this point, some of the magic was disappearing from that world of um, adventure. And I was, I think at that point, there was an anxiety growing in me. I'd kind of opened up and opened up and opened up, and then burnt my wings, and had um, this narrative that I needed to realize a lot of these experiences somehow. And that kind of that wore me down. And and it also led to me managing a kind of a, 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 a subtle psychosis. So so I was working with people with mental health and managing my own psychosis at the same time. So, but I was practicing yoga and yeah, and trying to work things out. At that point, I started to sit, and I found that sitting became a um, a place where all of that didn't matter. There was something, it was like I was able to get off this whirring wheel of inadequacy that and the arrogance as well, all those polarities and paradoxes that I could get off that wheel and be in a calmer place. Um, um, a, a, um, I think the theme of ambivalence was quite strong for me. Um, a we After torturing my girlfriend for a few years with this racked torture that I was in myself, I went to live in the yoga community that my mentor had created. But by this point, I'd started to kind of question his integrity, and also I'd started to do more formal Buddhist practice. So I was going on like intensive 10-day retreats, which was creating some tension in the community. And then I heard about Thich Nhat Hanh. Um, a, a monk at Samyeling had talked to me about him, this poet, and I saw he was doing a talk in a in Birmingham. So I went along to that talk, and that was kind of like, that was, I mean, you might call it tectonic, or something really shifted, something kind of really shifted at that point. And there was something about seeing that practice, that Zen practice, something about the grace and the poise and the spaciousness which that hungry hungry mind wanted some of. I got curious, and there was a point, there was an interval, and in the interval, the monk said, if you've got a question for Thai, please put them in the bell, and we'll attempt to read them. Anyway, I had a question, but I didn't put anything in the bell. Anyway, the second half resumed, and I was on the front row, right, with a few of the people that were living in the community with me. I was on the front row, and he just looked straight at me and he answered my question. And it was like, oh, wow, okay. um, and so something kind of was deep, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it confirmed something about my curiosity. And so a couple of months later, I left the community and went to Plum Village and spent the winter retreat there, which was a beautiful experience, really, really profound. Um, um, and the sense of family uh, that um, that generated was magical, I think. Um, and so and so so stupidly, in my Western consumery kind of way, I left at the end of that retreat, and kind of floated around for as a bit of a Dharma bum on some levels for a few a while, and sometimes quite solitary, sometimes with people. And in that time, I met Vicky, who became the mother of my children some years later. A few things happened while I was kind of floating around, and I mean, I was going to different Dharma centers as well and working to live there a little bit. And then my grandfather, who had reconnected with about 2 years before, I'd not seen my grandparents for several years. He died, so I kind of did that, said goodbye to him, and then I went back to Plum Village the following year and spent quite a long time there, and was given the role of the guest manager for the summer retreat, which was a great role to have, and felt like an affirmation of me being in the community there. I learned a lot from that. I'm not really putting any quotes in, really. I'm aware of that. Um, yeah, so that kind of like, so that, that brought me up to about the age of 30, So, and I think I am gonna just bring a quote in from Alan Watts here, if I can read it. And I think this kind of like sums up something that I was attempting to do in my 20s in a naive, wet behind the ears sort of way. And that is, it may seem both strange and unreasonable that strong and intelligent men should simply sit still for hours on end. The Western mentality feels that such things are not only unnatural, but a great waste of valuable time. However, useful as a discipline for inculcating patience and fortitude. Although the West has its own contemplative traditions in the Catholic Church, the life of sitting and looking has lost its appeal, for no religion is valued which does not improve the world. Yet it should be obvious that action without wisdom, without clear awareness of the world as it really is, can never improve anything. Furthermore, as muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone, it could be argued that those who sit quietly and do nothing are making one of the best contributions to a world in turmoil. So, I think the posture I took to my own turmoil was that. um, and whilst it was a kind of an escape, it was an escape I really needed. Um, uh, Plum Village was massive for me, but also the cultural challenge, because the request was is if you were going to robe there, the intention is a lifetime commitment. So that was a big deal. And it was a big deal that I wasn't really ready for. And at that point, and what do I mean by that? It's one of those decisions that happens like the smoothing of a stone on the beach. It's not one of those things you just do and decide. Well, for me it wasn't. Maybe for others it was. Anyway, Vicky came out for the summer retreat, and she kind of wanted to get home, and she kind of wanted me to be quite definitive on whether I was going to come back with her or stay. And so I committed to going back and to start this relationship proper with her. And that's what we did. I resumed training in therapy because I'd started that some years before. and yeah, as things went along, we spent some time living um, in yurts and stuff like that, and then we conceived my son, and then which was another a huge transition, and it felt like my nervous system amped up several notches in terms of how I was on the planet. And that was a time where, yeah, I, I contracted, I think, from practice to some degree and started to concentrate on this idea of family and survival, and had this more individualistic mentality come up in me, I think partly from fatherhood and the whole thing of nuclear families, which was something that I didn't really uh, choose. It kind of just sort of like happened on some levels. And so we did that for a while. It was joyful having the space to be available as a father, something that was really new in my system. I would recall one of the first days of having my son Angel, having him sitting on my lap while I'm meditating, and feeling like there was this bigger entity or being that I was sat in the lap of. It felt like this sort of like Russian doll experience, this sense of ancestry, which was kind of wonderful. It was really liminally beautiful. And I think, some of that held me. At that point, I'd started Hakomi, I'd met Trudy, I'd met Josh. And yeah, um, there was some really um, beautiful times in that, but there was something. I know I'm going on. Apologies. I'll try and wrap it up. Um, there was something. There was something that I'd lost sight of in that time, and I think that was that sense of that self-reliance had lost sight of the need of others to practice with. And that's where I really struggled. That's where I really, really struggled. So I was practicing. I was practicing, but I was practicing on my own, and I wasn't reading enough um, to support that. I was kind of like out there doing, doing it, doing that that kind of nuclear family individualistic thing, which it wasn't working. It wasn't working. I was distracting myself. The intimacy between me and Vicky was absent. And it culminated in us splitting up. It was the right thing for us to do. Our processes were really, really, really challenged in a lot of respects. That what we needed from another person was quite different to what we were. But so that again was another gateway to open into. At that point, I was quite a long way into my training in Hakomi. I think I'd already been certified by Flint and Donna, so they were in the picture to some degree. But I came out of that into my 40s, and was still kind of trying to kind of like recreate family, this idea of family that I'd started. And um, yeah, that was had its flaws. Yeah, that really did have its flaws, and I kind of messed up, but I was fortunate to get work at the Buddhist Centre in Manchester. And that was another thing that supported me to sustain a regular practice as a therapist and as a father, and kind of gave me a lot of they were kind of like gateways that I that kept me turning towards, despite a lot of the chaos that was occurring for me. Yeah. Um, let's see if I can kind of wrap things up a little bit, because I'm aware of the time. I'm really sorry. I had no idea it was going to go on so long. I didn't do any rehearsing. um, and let's see. Let's see. Coming out. So yeah, somewhere in that, yeah, the Sangha started to be cultivated cut out of the um, I would say out of the roots of the Hakomi community, and it, and I started to I was in Lancaster, and yeah, I had felt the opportunity to go, and yeah, there's still a lot of chaos occurring in my domestic life, but I started to. I think the first retreat I went to was something like 20 2013, 2014, or something like that. And I think as I've matured, I'm becoming more present to the sense of family that occurs through Sangha. Um, yeah, I think um, there's a sense of coming home to something that started at the age of 25 and 26 for me. I've been sitting for that long now. And that practice has enabled me to stay with things despite the storms and the chaos that my own ancestry has brought with it. All those habits that I've been surfing or falling into over the years. My father left quite a heavy shadow, and I had to do quite a lot of disentangling from a lot of my mum's pain as well. Let's see. Also, now my children have left home, and that sense of yearning for family has relaxed. That sense of aversion to that isolation at childhood has relaxed massively. Um, I feel a deeper uh, sense of ease, which I feel is something that I can relax into my therapy practice with. So that is liberating. There's still my character, you know, and in a way that feels like that's that messy what would I call it? Messy tragedy, you know, that messy tragedy, the anti-dream of the you know, the idea of, you know, life is what you make it. This, I think there's that's that's something that I can smile at. And I just I just want to kind of leave you with a couple of a couple of references, and that is one from Trunkborough, who you know, helped set up Sammy Ling, and also had an influence on Ron Kurtz's work. And that is that a broken heart is not something to be ashamed of, but rather a necessary quality for spiritual warriorship. Yeah, and I have another I want to leave us with this, if I can find it. Oh yeah, and this is a poem by Nanao Sakaki, and it's called "Let's Eat Stars." Believe me, children, God made sky for airplanes, coral reefs for tourists, farms for agrochemicals, rivers for dams, forests for golf courses, mountains for ski resorts, wild animals for zoos, trucks and cars for traffic tragedies, nuclear power plants for ghost dance. Don't worry, children. The well never dries up. Look at the evening glow. Sunflowers in the garden, red dragonflies in the air. A small child starts singing, "Let's eat stars, let's eat stars." That was written on Mount Taisutsu in Japan. Okay. Thanks for letting me burn your ears.
Thank you so much, Alastair. Feeling much love for you right now. Really appreciating your honesty and your courage and your humor and your wisdom and for just being you. And, I said we went back quite a long way, but I know that this talk's been a while in preparation, but also 50 odd years, however, feel enriched by being taken by the hand with you through your life. So thank you so, so much. And what I suggest, just for we won't have time to go into breakout rooms, but how about we go on to gallery view for a few minutes and share our appreciations with you of your beautiful talk this evening. Let's do that, and then we'll move on to the closing verses from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alastair, for that extraordinary talk. You started by saying something about the personalness of practice, and that was how it was. It was so generous to offer so much of yourself to us, and to be with the reality of your experiences, but also the wisdom of your reflections on them at the same time was, yeah, I feel changed by listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Alastair. I think, yes, such a generous talk, such an authenticity. I'm blown away by the rich tapestry of your life and the complexity of the path. There was something that was way seeking throughout. Thank you for so generously sharing that with us. I feel I have such a deep connection to you right now. Feeling such a love. Thank you.
Alastair, I can't see you, man. Where's the screen? Oh, there you are. You're on the second screen. I can't see myself now, but that's all right. Yeah, that was great. Thanks for your honesty, mate. And I was just really gutted you had to sell your motorbike to go to Ladakh. If you ever need a hand to get another motorbike, mate, I can help you out there. But yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for your honesty and just being yourself.
Thank you, Alastair. I feel as if I've walked beside you through your life, and it's really touched by. I'm trying to think how to put it. The yearning in you that brought you to this place and to be who you are now, and I feel it was a really great example of way seeking, and yeah, and I feel as if I feel that much closer to you now because you have offered yourself so generously. So thank you.
Say something, Duncan.
No, I was just going to say thank you, Alastair. I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody else is. I admire the honesty and the sharing of story and all the events in it, and yeah, I can see the sort of things, sort of common thread for the way seeking part of it, and it does mean, yeah, I do feel a lot closer to you as well, Alastair. So thank you for sharing, being inspirational. Thank you.
Alastair, I just want to say thank you so much. Everybody said the things that I'm thinking. To be so open and vulnerable and really share so much of your journey with us, I'm really, really touched. Thank you very much. From my heart.
What to say? I feel this. My heart feels this celebration every time I hear people responding to you. Because you're such a delight, and you've lived through so much, and I so respect your practice and why that's been so core for you. And I guess I so want people to see you, and you really helped them this evening. And that really touches me. Yeah, there's such an intelligence there that I think you really showed, and an intellect alongside a vulnerability. Yeah, I've just thoroughly enjoyed being with other people, being with you all, meeting Alastair. Thank you.
So in a minute or so, we'll move to the closing verses. So we've just got 1 minute of space if you wish to share anything.
Well, I want to thank you, Alastair. I can hardly find the words, but I was very touched and by the beautiful gift of you opening up this way. I always liked you, and it just increased by being permitted to come closer to you through your talk. And sorry for my clumsy words, but my heart is there.
Your words are succinct and simple. Claudine, thank you.